art can mean different things to different people. For me, it's all about the joy of creating. So if you draw, paint, write, dance, sing, craft, play air guitar, or even sculpt using nothing but mashed potatoes, consider yourself an artist and join the conversation. For the next half hour, meet the artist, learn about their inspiration, and enjoy the beauty of creativity. Welcome to Art Talk with John Cole Artist. Well, good evening, everyone. It's John Cole Artist, and today is, and I always have to say this because if I don't say it, I'll never know, but today is Tuesday, August 15th, 2023. So I want to say hello to everyone that's watching live tonight, and of course, those that are watching the replay, and later on, when this thing gets posted to all the major podcast platforms, hello to all you folks too. I have probably one of the most important people in my life tonight on the show, and that's Allyson Roberts. Now, Allyson is, in case you don't know her, and you should, she's a 3-time bestseller on Amazon, 2 Behind the Power books, and one that you wrote called The Spiritual Journey, which is an amazing story, and hopefully we'll touch on that a little bit later. She's also a TEDx speaker, very powerful speech, by the way, which is available on YouTube. She's the architect of Behind the Power, and later on in the broadcast, we'll talk a little bit about that because that's an event coming up in October in Atlanta, Georgia. And of course, she's most famous for being a cognitive behavioral expert. So Allyson, welcome to John Cole Artist. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for having me on your podcast. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, absolutely. It's a real pleasure. I'm so glad that you said that you would agree to come on.
Yeah.
I really wanted to have you on because of your expertise in how the mind works.
Oh, yeah.
And it's important, I think, for those folks that are listening who are either artists or who are creative, or those folks that don't think that they're creative.
Mm-hmm.
And yet something tells me they probably are, and there's probably a reason why they don't pursue that. So I was hoping we could talk a little bit about that tonight. But first, maybe if you could tell our audience a little bit about yourself, maybe some things that I didn't mention.
Sure. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. I have traveled almost everywhere, but I always end up coming back home. Georgia is just where I always come back and land. I have a beautiful adult daughter and a 5-year-old grandson, and a family full of dogs, and the occasional pet frog when we can tolerate it for a couple of minutes. And yeah, life is good.
A pet frog. I don't know if is that you, or is it your grandson, or who is it that?
It was Ren earlier tonight for about 10 seconds.
Yeah.
He said that he had a pet frog and then he let it go. So yeah.
Well, not long enough to name him, but still, that's
not long enough to name him.
Yeah. Yeah. So Christine's on. Christine Cole.
Hi,
she says,
Christine.
hello, beautiful souls. And Megan.
Hi, Megan.
Hey, friends. Now, Megan was on last week, and she did an amazing job.
I watched it. I watched the replay. She's amazing.
Yeah, and a couple of weeks before that, we had her husband Tim on, which was
I saw that too. I watched that replay too. He's amazing too.
Yeah, a lot of talented people, including yourself.
Thank you.
So, and here's Anna. Anna Davis is also on. Hey, y'all. Anna. So, boy, we could be doing this. Lucinda Bentley's also on.
Hey, Lucinda.
Got a whole bunch of great people, and all these folks have been on John Cole or on
Romper Room. I'll see Lucinda.
I know, it's great.
Anna.
So, but yeah, this whole idea of how the mind works, and well, first of all, just so everybody knows, I'm one of your clients.
Yeah.
And I've been with you now for almost 3 years. I know at least 2.5 years. And folks, let me tell you, working with Allyson has really changed my life. Just being able to see things differently, recognize my fears, knowing what's resistance and what's an actual fear has been amazing for me because it's allowed me to grow.
Yeah.
This podcast, for example, is something that I never thought I would be doing. And yet here I am doing it.
I know. So incredible.
And although I'll take some of that credit because I'm the one doing it, I do have to give you a lot of that credit for helping me to get to this point. So my question right off the bat would be, relative to the idea that oftentimes we don't think we can do things. Um, what do you think is the primary reason why we end up in that place, right? Whether or not you're doing an artist or whether or not you're looking for a new job or whatever. What do you think? Why do you think that we end up there, not knowing what to do or where to go?
Self-worth.
Self-worth.
Yeah, it's a lack of self-worth. It's a lack of believing in the self, and instead believing the lies that we tell ourselves, that we aren't good enough,
Mm-hmm.
that we don't know how, that it's too hard, that we can't figure it out, that we're stuck, that we're flailing, that
Right.
everything always works against me, nothing ever works out for me. It works out for everyone else, but it doesn't work out for me. And it feels so devastating and real when that's happening, and that's the most challenging part of being a cognitive expert and teaching this work, is that the frauds come in and just say, oh, just say affirmations and meditate for 5 minutes and you'll be all better. And that doesn't work. And then what happens is that when you struggle, even when you're doing all the right things, and you really feel broken.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're saying affirmations and you're meditating and your life is still in the crap can, then you really, really feel like, man, I was right. Like there is something absolutely wrong with me, because I'm doing everything that these people are telling me to do, and I still can't get it right. And
Right.
so it's the thing that stops us is the layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of stories that we have inside of us, that we are not capable of doing the thing.
Right. And a lot of that comes from early childhood, from the
Mhm.
adolescent period, maybe, right? Yeah, I'll admit that, with I mean, I think it's really easy for children specifically to, well, I mean, they learn from observation, they learn from the experiences that they're having.
Mostly from observation.
Right, right. And when they start, I would think when they start to develop the cognitive skills to start to understand their surroundings, this they're told things, right? They're told
Right.
things. They're told that perhaps, that maybe they shouldn't do something, maybe they shouldn't dress this way, maybe they shouldn't whatever. And I think that really affects you at a young age.
Well, I was having a conversation the other day about this, because it's not what we say to our kids, it's how we say it to our
Okay.
kids, and the lack of explanation around why we are trying to impart something upon them. We'll just take something really innocent, like looking both ways before you cross the street, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're a parent, and Johnny's at the stop sign, and you're 22 steps behind him, right? And you're like, look both ways before you cross the street. And then he starts to cross the street without looking both ways, and most parents are like, and then scold, and then like, you have to look both ways before you cross the street. Like, what are you thinking? What's wrong with you? And it's the tone, it's the fear that looks like anger.
Mm-hmm.
It's all of those things, instead of, and even if you are freaking out and you have that kind of reaction, right? Because we're all human. So you have that reaction when Johnny, when he's crying and you're crying, everybody's crying. To later on say, hey, and I mean later on as in like 15 minutes later, 30
Right.
minutes later, not 2 weeks later, to be like, hey, mommy was, or daddy was like, I was just really scared because I love you so much. And the reason that you need to look both ways before you cross the street is because not everyone's paying attention. And I don't want anything to happen to you. And so I'm sorry that I got upset. I was just really scared.
Right.
It's those kinds of things that when we're children and, if we're Johnny and mom and dad do that like every single time he goes to the stop sign, then Johnny grows up thinking, wow, I'm so dumb that I can't even look both ways before I cross the street. But Johnny doesn't know. Now he's John, right? He's John. But
Right.
he doesn't know that he's thinking that because it's just embedded back here
Right.
in our ancient brain, in our reptilian brain, right? And so he feels inadequate in just doing the simplest things because it was
Right.
never explained. And he didn't understand that it was fear. He always thought it was anger. And he never understood that his parents were just trying to keep him safe. He understood it as he got in trouble
Mhm.
because he did something wrong. And it happened multiple times. So it's just really, it's very interesting to get into this work and start unpeeling the layers of the onion because it rarely ever is this big thing that's keeping us from getting in the way of ourselves. It's usually those little things where we're just like, man, I made so much more of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess, I mean, that example there with not crossing the street, and that repetitive response, I guess, from the parents,
Mhm.
without the follow-up supportive, I love you so much type thing. Um, I mean, things like that, since it does build up this fear and this self-worth issue, would then manifest all over the place.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's probably, or that could be one reason, if not the primary, why perhaps people don't necessarily pursue the things that they want to pursue because of the fear, because of maybe the fear of judgment, or that
Hmm.
somebody's going to step in and say, dude, you can't do that, or don't do that, or whatever. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. And, right. So when we're talking about like in this particular context with creativity, and I'll admit, I've seen that in myself. I'm probably the biggest self-critic of the things that I do,
Right.
you know, and this because we've talked about this, but for me, folks, it doesn't even matter. That's the really funny thing. It doesn't even matter how good I do something. It's never quite good enough, but that in and of itself is a manifestation of, oh, hey, look at that. That in and of itself is a manifestation of what we're talking about. This. Okay, so if it's this program thing, I can use the word program because the computer is like not the computer. The brain is like a computer,
Absolutely.
right? So we're programmed really all through our lives with programming that we just don't understand the code of where it came from, right? To
Right.
borrow from the computer world. So how would we start to decouple that, or start to, reprogram ourselves? Can we reprogram ourselves?
Yes and no.
Okay.
And what I mean by this is you can take the charge out of the dynamite,
Hmm.
but the dynamite stick is still going to be there. So let's say that, an artist wants to paint, a self-portrait or something, and they've never done it before. And so it's out of their comfort zone, right?
Right.
So the brain is going to come in, and the fear brain only knows 3 sentences. I don't know. I can't. It's too hard. But we don't know that we're thinking that.
Right.
So what will happen is like that artist will be like, oh, I'm going to start it next week. And I don't know. I mean, I was going to use watercolor, but now I think I should use acrylic, but someone else said I should use oil. And should I do it 8x10 or 11x14? I just, I can't figure it out. And they just, anything out of our comfort zone we make it really, really hard.
Right.
Because the brain doesn't want us to do the thing, because if we do anything new, we're going to die. And
Mhm.
so that's just how the brain works. So let's say that, a person is doing mindset work, right? And they're like, okay, wait a minute. I want to do a self-portrait. Like, I actually want to paint a picture of myself.
Mhm.
So why am I making this so hard? Because I feel like it's going to be garbage, and people are going to look at it and they're going to laugh at me. They're going to think, oh, that looks like a stick figure. That looks terrible. Like, that doesn't even look like you. And so we're so afraid of all that judgment. And then you might, in the work, you might be like, wow, this is reminding me when I was in kindergarten and I drew a picture of my teacher, and everybody said that it looked like, Bernie or not Bernie, Ernie and Bert from, Sesame Street or something, that it didn't even look like my teacher. And I cried and I got really upset and no one comforted me. No wonder I don't want to do this.
Right.
Right. So then it's healing that and just starting to paint. So you do it and you lived, you survived, yay! And no one threw rotten tomatoes at you, and it's not half bad, and all of those things. And then someone hires you and they're like, we want you to paint our entire family on the dining room wall. You've never done it before. So now, even though you did the self-portrait and you survived, here comes the stick of dynamite. It's going to come out again because you've never done that before.
Right.
So it's not going to be as charged as the self-portrait because you've done some of the healing. But there's no finish line to self-healing.
Right.
And so some part of that story is still unresolved. Maybe you didn't resolve the part where, Luke came in and punched you in the jaw for, drawing such an ugly picture of the teacher, and but you got blamed for it. And I mean, maybe you left that part out. So now you've got to fix that part of the story so that you can go and paint the mural.
Right.
I know that's a really long answer to a short question, but
No, it's actually a really good answer. And I think it's very applicable to the artistic community specifically, because I think that a lot of artists, that I obviously can't speak for everybody because I'm not all artists, but I know that the people that I do know that have a creative side do tend to react that way, look at what they're doing that same way. But I will tell you, just firsthand, and this is, for the benefit of those listening, is that like Allyson said, it's kind of a lifelong process. I mean, the way I look at it is that depending on, doesn't even matter how old you are, you have this history of things that you've been exposed to, that you've heard, right? Situations that may not have turned out the way you expected. That's a lot of things that are built up in your mind, built up in your brain. And I think that it takes just as long, if not longer, to continue to work on that. Right. I mean, and like you said, just because you heal one small part of it doesn't mean that it won't manifest again. In other words, it's part of your life. It's built into you. It's just how you're going to tackle it, handle it, recognize it even. Because I think that's part of it, right? Is sometimes you might not even know that you're thinking that stuff.
Yeah, the awareness is the biggest piece of it.
Right.
The more that, and we'll just talk about artists. So the more that you want to grow in your art, and even like going to festivals or putting yourself out there into the world so that you can sell the art, because I have, besides you, I have other clients of mine who are artists. I have a person that is a iron sculptor that was my client for a long time, and he would make these beautiful iron sculptures, but he wouldn't do anything with them. And I'm like, you need to get these out into the world. Forget about the money. They were just so beautiful. It's so beautiful. They're like, they moved you. It was that kind of art where you just were moved by it, and he was like, well, what if nobody buys it?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, at least you'll know that you tried, and I think that, the artists that I work with, they're so, they're scared to be seen. They're terrified to be seen. It's very, and I get it, because it's kind of like my own work and my own journey, right? Like this, my work is my baby. I mean, this is, and so, I can be very self-protective of it at times, but if it's not out into the world, it's not going to help a single person. And so, if you are an artist and you're listening to this right now, the reason that you're not selling your art is because you're afraid that people are going to hate it.
Speaking from experience, yes. Speaking from experience, yes. And I think what I would add to that, at least from my perspective, and it sounds like the person that you're speaking with, the iron sculptor, is probably this very similar, and that is, you know what, it's like your book, The Spiritual Journey. Our art, your writing, his metal sculpture, or his, right? His, it's a direct representation of you.
Yeah.
And I think that when you are designing or creating something, when you're creating something, you're doing that from a very unique place within you. As an artist, there's something inside of you that makes you want to manifest that piece on canvas or an iron or oil paintings, whatever, right? And that's, of course, going back to earlier with the fear, that's where that fear steps in, because now you're really saying, and you're really opening up a part of you, you're exposing a part of you to other people. And of course, there's that fear of rejection, right? It's like,
right.
It's like, here I am, 21 years old. I'm going out for my first beer. I walk into a bar, and, I want to find somebody that likes me. Right. And then there's this fear of rejection piece, because all of a sudden now you're very self-conscious. Do I look okay? Am I dressed okay? Are other people going to like me? And it doesn't have to be just women. It could be just, you want to go out and make a new friend or something like that. So you become very self-conscious. And I think that same idea, that a lot of artists have that, because it's a piece of me. It's a piece of me, and that can be a very, very frightening feeling to have.
Yeah. It's vulnerable.
It is. And the question then becomes, I mean, as a society, especially these days, I mean, is it good to be vulnerable? Is it bad? I mean,
it's amazing. It's the biggest gift ever.
It is. It's an amazing gift, but it's also very scary, because, everything is polarized these days. So, and I think that
yeah, but that's, and I love that you just said that, because that is a form of codependency. It's, to not be vulnerable is to not be authentic. Right. And so, right. And to not be authentic is to people please. It's a form, it's fawning. It's a fear response. Right. So, if I like Sally and I'm walking into a room and everybody else hates Sally. Right. And somebody right. says something about Sally. Oh, she's a little, and I'm like, I love Sally. I think she's amazing. What we're afraid of in that moment is the primal fear that's in our DNA from when we were cave people, of being stoned to death, of all the spears being thrown at us, of being hung upside down and left out in the wilderness for the animals to come and eat us. Like, it's so in our DNA, and we don't know that we are in danger. Like, we don't know that we're feeling that, like, really primal danger. So we're just like, yeah, Sally is, man, she's awful. And then we go to our car and we're like, I'm a horrible, terrible person because I did not just stand up for my friend Sally.
Right.
And I went along with everyone else. And oh my gosh, what if she finds out? And then there's the shame, and then there's the guilt and all the things. And so it may be scary to stand in your power and be your true authentic self and stand up for Sally and yourself in that moment. But the repercussions of not doing that
Right.
are cancer and liver disease and hiding and having to just live with a feeling inside of you. And then maybe you go to Sally and you tell her, right, that, I didn't stand up for you, and now Sally's not your friend, and the
Right.
person, and you don't even care about these other people, right? But you love Sally, and now you've lost Sally. So yes, it might be scary, but the scarier proposition is to continue to live in fear and go with your fear feelings instead of standing in your power. And that's even with art. I went to a festival with Laura a couple of months ago, and I mean, booth after booth after booth after booth. I was like, come on, people, somebody show me some originality, because it was everybody had made what sells at the festival. And so it was just like honeybees and sunflowers and honeybees and sunflowers. And there's a rectangular wood signs that you go put by your door that say welcome and welcome home and welcome friends. It was in every shade, color, font, bulldogs, the lilies, like all the things. And I was like, people are making this art like everyone else because they're afraid that their original art won't sell.
Right.
And we ended up not buying anything. And the guy that was running the festival was like, well, your arms are empty. And I'm like, because I can buy all this stuff at Home Depot or TJ Maxx or, it made me sad, John. It made me sad because the art that was there was gorgeous and beautiful, but it was a copy. It was copycat of everybody else's stuff. It blew my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, that's not surprising. I think that, we're going to talk about this in a second, but, the whole idea of taking the path of least resistance isn't really, in my opinion, the way that you get to be your vulnerable and true authentic self, because, it's following the party line or towing the line or whatever that phrase is. I'm horrible with metaphors or whatever they are, but, that is not unique. And the fact is we're all unique people.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is the people that I care about most throughout my life that I've met have always been those people that are unique, that, you look at them and you're like, boy, that's like super weird that they're doing that. And yet there's something original and there's something authentic and there's something about that really is special to me. Everybody has their quirks, and it's their quirks that I think make people.
I do too. Like, I want to be around people who, are honest and speak their mind, and, their house doesn't look like everybody else's house. And, their clothes may be, in style, but yet they still have a tattoo that's just their own personality, or, makeup is like expressing like who they are, or maybe their nails are every nail color is different, like on authentic, like just something that is just like, this is me, this is what I bring to the table. Those are my people.
Oh yeah, those people are amazing, especially when you watch them on TikTok or if you watch them on Instagram or anything like that. There's just something about that.
So inspiring.
It draws your attention, and you're like, you know what? And it's not necessarily emulating what they're doing, but it's emulating that concept that they can be themselves.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, that helps me, because it's like, well, if they can do this quirky thing, then why can't I be my quirky self?
Exactly. So, yes. It gives other people permission to be themselves.
And that's why I really, and believe it or not, we're already at 30 minutes. I cannot believe this conversation. I mean, I could talk all night and I don't want to keep you, but I will say that a couple things. First, what you're providing to your clients, just for the folks that are listening, you provide everything that we're talking about in great level of detail. Um, and the way that you instruct us, two things. Number one, you're very patient because, some of us are older, some of us are younger, but all of us have had life experiences that have affected who we are today, and they haven't all been good. I mean, let's be honest, the world sometimes can be a crazy place. But you're very, very patient, and you're very smart when it comes to helping people, at least at a minimum, be aware and also be willing, because I think those two things go hand in hand. I think it's one thing to be aware of something, but if you're not willing to at least look at yourself, be introspective, and, at least admit to yourself that there might be something that you could do or think differently, I should say, not necessarily do, but think differently. So those two things alone, I think, is a great service that you're providing.
Thank you.
I know that this is your life, and I know that you love it.
Very much.
Yeah, and you do have an event coming up that both of us are going to be a part of. Can you
Yeah.
speak on that a little bit?
Yeah. So the link is on the screen. There's no www before it. It is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Behind the Power. It is our third official year of doing this, our fourth unofficial year. The very first year I did Behind the Power, there were like 4 people there. It was amazing. But yeah, so this year is it's cool and it's different because as all of my clients move and change and grow and open doors to new opportunities, I also change and grow.
Mm-hmm.
So this year the majority of Behind the Power is going to be mindset and empowerment. And then we're also, while the panels are going on, so we're going to have panels every day. And while those panels are going on, I'm going to be interviewing people for the opportunity to write their book with me and get on the TEDx stage. So it's just, I'm finding that, I really have a passion so much for people getting their stories out into the world, John, because we don't change. Most of us don't change from mathematics or science. I mean, it helps us, and we definitely need to learn it to function in the world. We change from people sharing their stories,
Right,
and sharing what they've been through and who they are and how they overcame it. And every single person, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, like every single person that I've ever met, that I've spent any significant time with, they have shared a story with me where I'm just like, wow, I am a better person for having just learned what they went through. I'm a better person for having witnessed sometimes what people go through as their coach, right? And so it's just, God is calling me to do it, and I feel very inspired in my action. I will always make the emphasis mindset work, because that's my heart and soul. But Behind the Power this year is very empowering. We are not focusing on trauma for the first time. We are focusing on empowerment and being better for what we've lived through, and building our lives from the foundation of who we are. And some people have pushed back a little bit and said, I don't want to come to Behind the Power because it's going to be all about business. And I'm like, who said that? And not only that, but we do need to treat, whether you have a business or you work, or you outside of the home, or you work inside the house, there are certain parts of our lives where we need to treat our life like a business.
Yep.
When we go to a doctor's appointment, we need to treat that like a business. When we're managing our money, when we take our car to the mechanic, when we're shopping for a house, like there are just certain things that if you're all in your personal mindset about, I can't afford this, and I can't figure this out. And you're in all of that fear, and you're not just treating it like A plus B equals C, and I'm just going to do this over here, and I'm just going to make it happen. Then you're really just giving your life, you're just a big, I don't know, a disservice to yourself.
Yeah.
You're doing a disservice to yourself, because living in that kind of fear all the time about everything is exhausting.
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
Yeah. And I will say that I can understand why people might be resistant, and because I was, but I'll tell you that there is light at the end of that tunnel.
Yeah. And
There
it's
is
not a train coming.
It's not. It really isn't. So, so folks, check out the website. It's btp23.vfairs.com for those that are listening to the podcast afterwards on the audio. I'll say that again. It's BTP, or Bravo Tango Papa, for the military folks. 23.v as in Victor Fairs.com. This is going to be my second year speaking, be my third year attending. Last year was amazing, folks. And I'll just say one more thing about this, having been there twice. You will never find a more loving and accepting group of people.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about the folks that I know, but those that have no experience with the behind the power, but who make the effort to go. It is such a wonderful experience that you cannot help but walk away feeling empowered.
So true.
So folks, please check it out. Megan writes, love this so much, makes me miss class. Attend Behind the Power if you are able, game changer. So even Megan is a really,
we miss you too, Megan.
Yeah, we
very much.
We do. But anyway, check out the website. So Allyson, thank you so much for spending the time with me. Again, I should push this thing to a 2-hour show, which I have no problem doing because the conversation's fantastic.
People fall asleep.
I don't know about that. I'll be awake. But thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. And hopefully sometime we can do this again. It's been a pleasure.
I would love it.
And in the meantime, folks, stay true to yourselves, be your authentic selves. And if you're afraid to do something, just give it a try. A dinosaur, I promise, won't eat you. So, all right, folks, you guys have a good night, and I'll see you next week. Next week, I have a very special show. For those of you who listen to the show regularly, I had my wife, Christine, on a few weeks ago, and she can do readings of people and then paint paintings. And we're going to have a mystery person on. Yep, there's a Christine Cole original up on the wall. But we're going to have a mystery person on, and she's going to do a reading live on the broadcast. So it's going to be really, really cool.
Wow.
So stay tuned for that. That'll be next week. So Allyson, have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Everybody else, we'll see you next week. Thank you so very much for joining me on the Art Talk podcast, where it's my goal to bring artists together to talk about their craft. If you'd like to join me for a conversation, please reach out via email at johncoleartist@gmail.com or by visiting my website at johnrobertcole.com. So until next time, keep crafting, painting, and inspiring others with your creativity. You make more of an impact than you know.